This is the true story of a man who got someone to cut off one of his legs and then went on to build a business worth $100 million. If you've ever used a dinner plate or a cup or a milk jug that isn't made of wood, metal, glass or plastic, thank him. His name was Josiah Wedgwood, and this is the story of what he did and why. No one except Josiah Wedgwood's parents knew exactly when he was born, but he was baptised in England on the 12th of July 1730. At the age of 7, he had to walk 10 kilometres to and from the only school that was willing to teach him every day. We'll get to the whys later. Adults who walk quickly can do 10 kilometres in 1 hour and 30 minutes, so a 7-year-old with shorter legs would have taken much longer. But all this walking was not the reason why Josiah Wedgwood had to have his leg cut off. We'll come to that later. When Josiah was 9, his father died, and he and his mother and his 12 older brothers and sisters all began working in the Wedgwood family pottery business. The Wedgwoods were a whole town of potters, pottery makers, who came from Burslem, the most important of the 6 towns in North Staffordshire which form the pottery centre of England. These 6 towns would later become a single city called Stoke-on-Trent. Josiah was a full-fledged potter by the time he was 12. These days we can't imagine a 9-year-old having to carry and then throw a heavy lump of clay onto a potter's wheel, turn said potter's wheel with their foot again and again and again, bake whatever they had made, decorate it, and finally sell it. It goes some way to explaining why 4 generations of the many Wedgwoods before Josiah weren't famous for their pottery, and why everyday cups in England in his day look like this. One day when Josiah was 12, he woke up with smallpox. In the fight between Josiah and smallpox, Josiah won, but his right knee became very weak and painful, and when he turned 16, the pain got so bad he couldn't turn a potter's wheel anymore and had to stop making pottery. Without further ado, he moulded small trinkets, kept records, came up with designs, and carried out experiments. Josiah enjoyed experimenting, or what we now call research and development, or R&D. His family supported him because they weren't part of the Church of England, his grandfather saying that knowledge based on reason, experience and experiment was preferable to dogma. This belief of the Wedgwood family was the reason why the closest school that was willing to teach all the Wedgwood children was a good 10 kilometres away on foot. As Josiah was the youngest child, his family business was handed down to his oldest brother, so when he was 24, Josiah had to start his own business, partnering with Thomas Wealden, a master potter from Staffordshire who made some of the first dinner plates to be designed in Britain. 2 years later, in 1756, while Josiah was out promoting his and Wealden's pottery, he met his distant cousin Sarah Wedgwood. Her family called her Sally, and Josiah soon did the same. Sarah came from the rich side of the Wedgwood family. Her father, Richard, a trader who was also Josiah's cousin, was concerned that Josiah couldn't support any family he was to have with Sarah, and he made Josiah promise to make a name for himself before they married. Richard added that he couldn't see pottery as Josiah's ticket to success because Josiah couldn't turn a potter's wheel anymore. Upon hearing this, Josiah became determined to succeed in pottery. Pottery is clay or mud that has been baked so that it turns hard, and in Josiah's time there were 3 types. Porcelain or fine china originated in China. Porcelain was like glass. It could let light through and was smooth and didn't have any holes or pores, allowing it to hold hot and cold liquids. Porcelain that was imported from China was used by royalty, while those who weren't royalty made do with European porcelain that was showy but crammed with too much detail to be useful. That porcelain was made of kaolin or kaolin, a type of white clay named after Gaoling village in China, was not known in England until the 1770s. The second type of pottery in England, stoneware, had been created in Europe in the race to discover the recipe for porcelain. Unlike porcelain, if you held stoneware up against bright light, it couldn't let the light through and it was very heavy. As stoneware didn't contain any kaolin, even though it was baked under high temperature like porcelain, it wasn't smooth like porcelain and it was rough and full of tiny holes. To make a biscuit or cookie smooth and shiny and to decorate it, you have to apply a coating called glaze. The same applies to stoneware, but it is hard for the glaze and any colours to stay in place, and as a result, glazed stoneware doesn't have the fine, detailed look of porcelain. George Washington, the first president of the United States, used stoneware. Josiah, his family, and his business partner Thomas Wealden made earthenware, the third type of pottery in England back then. Making earthenware was like making biscuits or cookies with any old clay or mud from the garden, and as earthenware was baked in very low heat, it was even rougher and had more holes than stoneware. Thomas Wealden was popular because he had glazed his earthenware with coloured glazes to get what he branded his tortoise-shell pattern. Now he wanted Josiah to find ways to make colourful clay, to make coloured earthenware from these clays, and to coat this earthenware with clear and colourless glaze. There was no such glaze around, and it fell to Josiah to find it. The idea was that while Josiah was experimenting, Wealden could focus on the business side of things. After 4 years in which he found 5,000 pieces of coloured clay, but not the elusive colourless glaze, Josiah found a shiny green glaze. In 1759, seeing that Thomas Wealden was determined to make colourful pottery which was not to Josiah's taste, Josiah left his partnership and set off to make shiny green earthenware on his own. Not long afterwards, Josiah must have come across tea, coffee, and Delftware because he switched to trying to make white earthenware. He must have realised that he had to have customers who could afford tea and coffee, which were very expensive back then, and that if his customers used white cups, they could show off what they were drinking to their friends. Thomas Wealden's dark-coloured tortoise-shell earthenware was popular in the north of England where Josiah was, but in the south of England the fashion was for Delftware, earthenware coated with a white glaze and painted with designs in blue to look like Chinese blue and white porcelain. Originally made in the Dutch city of Delft and taken to the south of England by King William of Orange, a Dutchman who ruled England until 1702, Delftware was popular because it was cheaper than porcelain, but unlike porcelain and like all earthenware, Delftware cracked in the heat of coffee and tea. Potters from the north of England, such as Thomas Wealden, responded to Delftware by using flint to turn the red clay of Staffordshire white, ending up with cream-coloured earthenware. Other Staffordshire potters used white clay from Devon and Cornwall, but had ended up with yellow earthenware. These potters had learned about the white clay from British patents, which revealed the full recipes for making porcelain. Josiah Wedgwood now began reading around and experimenting. He found that to get shiny stoneware that was white or cream-coloured, you had to add glaze which was made of table salt. To make porcelain, you had to add the white clay of Devon and Cornwall, and if you glazed the porcelain, which was not really needed as porcelain was already smooth, the white clay had to be added to the glaze as well. Josiah had a eureka moment. The glaze used for earthenware didn't contain any clay at all. What would happen, Josiah wondered, if he were to add white clay to the glaze for earthenware and then to earthenware itself? To Josiah's astonishment, when he did this, a shiny cream-coloured earthenware resulted. This cream-coloured earthenware could be moulded into any shape, and it didn't break when hot tea or coffee or liquids was poured into it, Josiah had hit the jackpot. Josiah wanted people to buy what he had made, but after trying so hard to get earthenware to pretend to be porcelain, he suddenly realized what he wanted. He wanted to be himself. He didn't want to pretend that he and his pottery was something they were not. He called his company Josiah Wedgwood and called his earthenware creamware, making it very clear that what he sold was neither white in colour nor was it porcelain. This way, he made sure that he didn't step on the toes of porcelain makers, especially those with patents, and as a result, no one could stop him. Josiah used his years of working on trinkets and fine detail to make the cream colour and simple shapes of his creamware pop against the many decorations on its surface elements. He also used maths to calculate proportions for making new shapes for earthenware, making his pottery stand out for its simplicity and polished elegance. In a world where porcelain was popular and buyers bought stoneware thinking it was porcelain, Josiah had taken the biggest risk of all, to be himself and to make the most of what he had. It was a gamble that paid off immediately. Nothing like his creamware had ever been seen before, and it caused a storm in London. By 1764 he had received his first overseas order, and by 1765 he had Queen Charlotte's permission to call himself Potter to Her Majesty and to call his creamware Queensware, brands which made him a fortune. Seeing that Josiah was unbreakable in extreme heat like creamware, Richard allowed him to marry Sarah in 1764 after 8 years of her unwavering support and belief in him. It was Sarah who would later manage Josiah's finances and sales figures as he worked on his pottery. Just as Josiah was on top of his game, his right knee bothered him again. The pain in his right knee was always there. It had never left him. There were days when he could put up with it, and there were days when his knee became inflamed and he couldn't walk, and whenever that happened, Josiah would read. At his doctor's urging, Josiah had his right leg cut off below the knee either when he was 34 or 38 years old. That he later called the day the deed was done St. Amputation Day suggests that he was grateful to be freed from pain. Medicine back then could only go so far. Josiah recovered fast and used a wooden leg to get around. In 1769, he used Sarah's money to open a factory. He also bought white clay from the Cherokee Nation in what is now North Carolina in the US to do even more research and development, reaching dizzying heights in 1775 with jasperware. Jasperware was Josiah's answer to blue and white British earthenware and British porcelain, which was still trying to be something they were not. Josiah had promised his fellow Staffordshire potters that, "I will give you my word as a man, I have not made, neither will I make, any blue printed earthenware." He also told British porcelain makers that it was possible to use the white clay to make pottery that wasn't porcelain and which looked nothing like porcelain. Inspired by just one ancient Roman glass, and after 3,000 failures, Josiah let the blue of his unglazed, biscuit-like stoneware and the white of his highly detailed seams made of baked Cherokee white clay do the talking. Jasperware left Josiah's prudish British customers speechless, but once they saw that he had put clothes on his Greeks and Romans, they rushed to buy it, and it remains popular today. Because of his knee problems, Josiah had to use business methods which were new for his day, but which are still in use today. He hired door-to-door salesmen to sell his products. He had shops with spectacular product displays, and if any customers complained to him that what he had sent them was damaged on arrival, he would replace it. He chose certain customers like queens and empresses as trendsetters and influencers and sold them new designs early and at a high price before selling the same designs to everyone else at a later date and at a far lower price. He was the TK Maxx and Bicester Village of his time. Inspired by the shapes and designs of the Chinese porcelain he later came across, Josiah began to get his factory to add fine details onto simple shapes and designs that mostly relied on 1 to 3 colours. He didn't imitate or copy Chinese scenery and motifs, but chose instead to show what he saw every day. This was the closest thing to postcards and photographs about England for people who were curious about the English way of life, such as the German-born British royal family and royalty outside Britain, while to the Britons who had to leave the English countryside behind to live in the cities and in Britain's colonies in North America and elsewhere, Josiah's pottery was a tangible memory of their old life. Sales went through the roof, and eventually 80% of Josiah's sales would come from outside Britain, where the market was boundless. At a time when exploitation and abuse was rife, Josiah Wedgwood was a rarity who respected his suppliers, workers, and customers. Around the same time his leg was cut off, Josiah had heard of white clay in the lands of the Cherokee and had commissioned an agent to buy it. The agent and his interpreter negotiated for 4 hours to buy 5 tons of clay in exchange for 500 in weight per ton of leather up front. Josiah paid up, and after the Cherokee white clay ran out in 1783, he never did press the Cherokee for white clay mining rights and land, but simply switched to using white clay from Devon and Cornwall, saying that it was cheaper to do so. It was later confirmed that the Cherokee clay and the Cornish clay were all kaolin, the vital ingredient for porcelain. As for his workers, Josiah gave them homes next to his factory. He also gave them daycare, healthcare, schooling, retirement pensions, and even air conditioning. His was the first ever pottery factory in Britain to have division of labour. When he was a child and working as a potter, he had to do everything. But in his factory, he had one person doing the fetching, another doing the throwing, a third designing, a fourth baking, and so on and so forth. And because this meant that pottery work became specialised and repetitive and a tad boring, he paid his staff very, very well. Josiah almost had to give up pottery because of his injured leg, but with the division of labour, a potter with an injured leg or arm could still do what they did best, making pottery. This way of working allowed Josiah to delegate a lot of work to his colleagues, and together they dealt with copycats and customer demand by constantly coming up with new designs and producing products with the same design very quickly, at the same time and at the same quality. This allowed them to sell products in sets and not as individual pieces. Later in life, under Sarah's influence, Josiah used his skills to make and give away pottery medallions showing a chained black man and the words, "Am I not a man and a brother?" or a chained black woman and the words, "Am I not a woman and a sister?" He didn't care about the shocking way the man and the woman were shown, because in a world before cameras and smartphones, he wanted to show the ugly reality of how people were abused when they were enslaved. This helped with the banning of slavery, first in Britain and then elsewhere. But it was to his customers that Josiah could truly show what he thought being a man and a brother was. He single-handedly insisted that all his customers would get the same earthenware or stoneware products of the same design and quality. Josiah was known for shouting, "This will not do for Josiah Wedgwood," and for using his walking stick to break things in front of his workers if his standards were not met. He was not one to sell broken products, or products crammed with mistakes, or products with varying designs, at different prices to different groups of people. As a result, even empresses like Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, used earthenware, while servants and maids found themselves using the same items as empresses and queens. Josiah's customers appreciated how he had allowed them to use works of art to bring beauty into their lives every day, and by the time of his death in 1795, he had made $100 million in today's money and headed a worldwide brand, Wedgwood, that still stands for luxury, refinement, quality and beauty today. He never let his injured leg define him or stop him from doing what he liked, including making pottery. He powered through experiments to get round patents, and he did a lot of reading and set up systems to replace what he didn't have and to improve on what he did have. He pioneered business methods ranging from branding to outstanding customer service, and most importantly, he showed that to build a business empire based on luxury, less is more. Beauty is in the everyday and in the tiniest details, and there is no need to copy or exploit or steal anything from anyone. Apart from sheer hard work, his success came from being curious, innovative, respectful, honest, and above all, himself. For more inspiring stories, actual business insights, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to Mobile Miscellany. Thanks for listening and see you in the next video.